Today I will tell you about an incident that happened to my own sister. Many parents wish for a son to fulfill their desires. But in our house, my father wanted my sister to fulfill his heart's desire. However, many people in my maternal family could not accept this well. A completely healthy and normal child was forcibly turned into a patient. Black magic was performed on my sister. My parents had a love marriage. They both loved each other almost madly. It was such a deep love that everyone would cite them as an example to others. Let me give you some background about my family so the incident becomes easier to understand. My father was good at studies and came from a well-off family. On the other hand, my mother's family was extremely poor. They could barely manage to eat and survive, but they had no particular interest in education because they couldn't afford the expenses. Moreover, the people in that family were steeped in old customs and traditions that had been continuing for generations, and they often harbored hostile attitudes, made sarcastic remarks, and behaved jealously. These mental illnesses existed within my mother's family. Everyone used to say that girls cannot study. In my maternal uncle's house, only the boys had passed matriculation. You can imagine that thinking about girls' education was out of the question there. However, my mother was fortunate that her beautiful face had touched my father's heart. Both families were strongly opposed to the marriage, but my father married my mother anyway. For both our families, my maternal and paternal homes, this marriage was completely different. The people in our house, being an educated family, wanted to prove themselves. They wouldn't say anything openly, but in the early days, my mother had a very hard time establishing her place. She went through very difficult times. On the other hand, many people from my maternal home opposed this marriage. Although my mother was very happy, my father never let her lack anything in life. He took my mother to live in a separate house. But someone or other from either the paternal or maternal home would say something that would deeply hurt both my father and mother. Gradually, my father and mother reduced their meetings with relatives considerably. But people never let anyone live in peace under any circumstances. My mother had 3 sons one after another, and all 3, after opening their eyes to the world for just a few moments, closed them forever and fell into eternal sleep. According to the doctors, my mother was completely healthy. The babies were also born healthy with no physical complications whatsoever. But none of the babies survived. And someone told my father that black magic had been performed on your wife. Our babies would definitely be born and would breathe, but they wouldn't be able to survive. My father searched our entire house thoroughly to check if any black magic materials were hidden anywhere, but he found nothing. Then my father called a sorcerer. He said it's impossible that there's no talisman hidden in your house. The talisman would be in such a place that its effect directly falls on your wife. Clean your room thoroughly. The entire house was cleaned thoroughly again. Finally, a talisman tied inside the leg of my mother's bed frame was discovered. It was tied with thread of the same color as the bed leg, meaning this work was done with great patience and time. First, my father gave that talisman to the sorcerer. He looked at it and said, "Yes, this is the talisman responsible for your condition." Then he burned it right in front of my mother and father. My mother was given many things to eat as treatment. Instructions were given to purify the room, and he said, "Throw this bed outside the house." The talisman was attached to this bed. This bed will be of no use to you anymore. More harm can come from it. My father asked many questions about who could have done this work, but he didn't reveal any names. Not many people came to our house, just my father, mother, and 2 housemaids were at home. My father suspected both of them. Perhaps through one of their hands this heinous act was carried out. My father questioned them extensively, but they said nothing. Those housemaids had come from our local area, so my father dismissed both of them from service. My mother followed the sorcerer's advice. The house became completely purified. My grandparents didn't even want to set foot in our house, no matter how much my father and mother called them. It's not that the relationship had ended completely. My father himself would take my mother there, and similarly, my father would also take my mother to her maternal home. My mother tried to visit her maternal home less. The behavior of everyone there and everyone's taunting looks caused my mother great pain. When people in your own home treat you like a stranger, the pain of that cannot be expressed in words. My mother would always complain to my father that whenever she went to visit relatives, severe pain would start in her head. Her health condition would become very bad, and then such panic would spread that she had to be taken to the hospital as an emergency that very night. Then, on the sorcerer's advice, my mother completely stopped going out of the house. She wouldn't meet anyone anymore. When my mother became pregnant again, my father stopped meeting with relatives and didn't even tell anyone about my mother's pregnancy. No one had any information. Food prepared by anyone else was also completely forbidden for my mother. My mother would say that I cannot trust even my own people. So how can I trust anyone from outside? When a matter concerns my wife's health and my unborn child, whenever my mother's health deteriorated, my father would cook for her himself. Once this news reached my paternal family that my father was serving my mother in every way possible, then many jokes and mockery were made about my father in loud voices. But my father heard it with one ear and let out the other. Then I was born. This time a child came into my father and mother's life. In this happiness, when I was 1.5 months old, my father went to both my maternal and paternal homes with sweets. But for both sides, only cold responses were received. My father didn't want to keep his child in such a hostile environment, so we moved to another area. My father always loved having a daughter. He wanted his daughter's voice to be heard throughout the house. He would pray day and night himself, and lifting my small hand, he would make me pray too, asking God to grant us a beautiful and healthy sister. And I would pray with my little lips trembling. And truly, God heard our prayers. When my sister was born, it was as if the joy of a real Eid descended upon our house. A flood of happiness swept through. My father and mother would look at each other and say, God has heard us. But one mistake was made. My father couldn't hide this happiness. He went to his own area, slaughtered a cow, cooked it in a huge pot, and distributed all the food among people. Everyone would say we have never seen any father so happy at the birth of a daughter. 6 years passed by without us even realizing it. But there was something strange about my sister. One thing was that when she got a little older, while crying, she would roll her eyes upward in such a way that only the white part of her eyes could be seen. And when I saw her like that, I would get very scared and cry. Another strange thing was her making her body heavy. Not that she suddenly became fat, as she was always very thin with a very skinny body, but such a heavy feeling or inertia would come over her that all the flexibility of her body would completely disappear. 2 or 3 adult people together couldn't even push this thin, weak girl aside. It would seem easier to move an iron ball. The sorcerer sprinkled water on her. At first, she just sat quietly without understanding anything, with a look of fear on her face. When the sorcerer asked her loudly, "Tell me, does anyone appear to you?" Then my sister looked at the holy man and burst into tears, and for the first time in her life, nodded her head yes. She said there's a woman who is always with her, who appears to her, and that woman's hand was completely burnt. She also said that when she sat on my sister's shoulder, my sister couldn't move even a hair from her place, and wherever exactly on her body she placed her hand and pressed hard, severe pain would occur in exactly that spot. And this woman was the one who wasn't letting us go anywhere nearby. That woman would tell my sister, "Before, I was with your mother, and now I am with you." My father and mother shuddered upon hearing this. Believe me, the sorcerer had such spiritual knowledge and power that my sister would just point, and talismans would be found in the places she indicated. But the problem was that no one came to or went from our house. So where did all these talismans come from? It was revealed that all this was done through satanic jinns. Then the holy man asked, "Did you perform the child's akikah?" My father said, "Of course, I did it within 7 days of birth." He asked again, "What did you do with the hair?" My father said, "At that time I was alone. There was no elder with me." But then suddenly my father remembered that my maternal uncle had suddenly come to the house that day. right at the time when my sister's Akika work was happening. When all the responsibility fell on my father, he doesn't remember anything about what happened to my sister's cut hair. No one else came to the house that day except my uncle. And if the hair had remained at home, it would have been visible clearly. My father would have happily floated it in water. The holy man said, "Do you remember anything about floating that hair in water?" My father said, "No, I only remember that her hair was cut, but I don't remember at all where exactly the hair was kept." Then that hair was never found again, and my father couldn't remember anything. The holy man said those hairs were used to perform black magic on the child. All this was done to make your child seem abnormal, so that her future life would be spent like a helpless person, and everyone would say she is mentally incapable and sick, so that her entire future would be ruined. And from exactly where this magic came, from that very place, magic was done before to cruelly end your children. My mother had no idea that even members of her own family could be involved behind all this. On one hand, as my mother's love for my father was infinite, similarly, it should be remembered that we were no less in dignity than anyone else. My mother would never do anything without my father's permission, and the peace and reassurance that my father and mother had for each other was perhaps something no one could tolerate. All this was done to put them in sorrow and suffering. And when everything turned upside down like this, my father found a lot of evidence that one person from our own maternal home was involved behind all this. My uncle was just a tool. You cannot even imagine how much chaos descended upon our lives at that time. Despite all this, my mother never hindered my studies and never let any bad effect of this fall on me. My sister's treatment continued nonstop. We were also very afraid to go to our own area. Then my father made a final decision. My father sold the house here and everything, and we moved far away to another area. Believe me, we didn't inform anyone at all. My father left his good job and blocked his own SIM card so that no one could know our location in any way. Actually, sometimes you have to run away from some toxic relationships like this just to save your own life. For my father at that time, nothing was more important than keeping my sister normal and bringing her back to a healthy life. Our financial situation was not so good that we could change our location so easily without being able to inform anyone. And this decision was truly so beneficial that we could keep my sister very close to the earth here alongside treatment. We would make her walk barefoot on the earth for long periods, which had a very good positive effect on her, and she herself began to feel very comfortable. In that new house, there were quite a few empty spaces with raw earth. My sister would play there all day. My mother would even make an earthen stove outside and cook so that my sister would always be in front of her eyes. And gradually, my little sister really began to become normal. Everything gradually returned to normal. Her mental condition also improved a lot. Day and night, my father and mother took care of her, paid special attention to her eating and drinking, and the emotion I saw in my mother for my little sister, I never saw anywhere else. My father and mother truly worked day and night, spending long hours with her, feeding her, reading religious texts to her themselves, reciting verses one by one. Even today, when I remember those difficult times, I think about how selfless the power of parents' love is. The sorcerer would say that I have seen very few people come out of the terrible effects of black magic so quickly. Human willpower and immense faith in God, these two things alone can help you. This is how people become free from all such dirty things. Otherwise, you will often hear people say that we have done so much treatment but got no results anywhere. But I have seen my mother and father's tireless efforts working with my little sister, and I believe with all my heart and soul that if you get such selfless companionship, it is definitely possible to face all the bad things in the world. Then my father forever forgot those toxic relationships that gave nothing but pain and suffering. This was my story. Goodbye.